So you didn't get in. It can be extremely heartbreaking if you are somebody who has applied to a festival or even a show. You filled out the applications, you put in the effort. It can hurt. And the more that you hear no, or the more that you apply to festivals and shows and you get told not this time, it can really take a lot out of a person. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of the harder realities of burlesque, which is a pretty common experience, and that is navigating rejection for festival applications. And this is going to be less scripted. It's more of me just talking off of my own experiences and thoughts as I go. Before I dive into the navigating part of it and the personal feelings and experiences, I want to talk first about why a person might not be accepted into a show or festival. Some of these may seem obvious, but it is really important to still acknowledge it and to mention it so that we can get the full perspective. What curation looks like for a show to really help kind of ground us in the bigger picture, and then we can zoom in and focus on the personal experiences from there. I have experiences in producing a variety of events, whether that is my own productions for just a one-time community event. I produce both the Shade Burlesque Festival and co-produce Isle of Teas Burlesque Festival. I have assisted with curating the workshop lists for BurlesqueCon with the presenter applications. I've also been on the panel for other festivals to help them review applications. So I personally have quite a bit of that background, behind the scenes perspectives. That's where I'm going to be coming from for this section especially. So what goes into curation? Any ethical producer will have a lot of different logistics to consider when casting for a show or a festival. Does the act fit? If it's a festival, they will probably be wanting acts that are more refined, clear, concrete, acts where there is limited or no interpretation of the act, and whatever the concept is comes across extremely clearly. I personally try to avoid the language of polish because I think that is a very colonial concept, and also it depends on that person's perspective of what is and isn't polished. But I tend to look for, like, can I see the passion? Does the performer feel in the moment and present? Do I understand the concept based on what they've described of what it should be? And do they actually take advantage of the costume and the reveals, or do they just take off outfits and costume pieces randomly? They don't put time into it, they don't take time to reground themselves, and it feels very rushed. Those are just some things that I personally look for when I am looking at acts. In addition to just the act itself, there's also the other logistics of, is there anything else in the show that is similar? Depending on the show, you might not want to have 4 different classic burlesque acts, all with feather fans, maybe all with the same colors or the same style of music. As a producer, I would try to avoid that unless it was specifically a classic burlesque show or a jazz show or like a specific theme around that kind of idea. Basically looking at what are the other acts that have already been accepted or going to be in the show. Does this act stand out on its own? I want to make sure when I'm putting people on stages, especially for the festivals, every act stands out from each other and no one feels like they're being overshadowed by someone who's doing a similar concept or similar costume idea, making sure that they're not feeling like they're competing against each other. From an audience perspective, at least, I want everyone to be remembered and I want everyone to be memorable. If I do have multiple of a similar act style or feeling or vibe, I might just separate those two so that maybe one's performing on Friday, one's performing on Saturday. If I have a few, maybe one's before intermission, one's after, and really making sure I'm giving people the best chance to stand out around the other performers performing with them. And beyond that, there's also equity and diversity and representation. Does the producer have to say no to some of those performers they originally said yes to make sure they are increasing the diversity of individuals from diverse backgrounds, making sure that everybody from any community has as equal of a chance of being on that stage? I've had to say no to a lot of performers who I really wanted them on my stage that year. I really wanted to say yes, but because of a bunch of different factors, there have been times I've said no to people because there was somebody who was already accepted who had a similar act, or the headliner has a very similar act. I've personally also said no to some people who I, again, absolutely wanted to say yes to, but because I produce multiple events, maybe I've worked and hired that performer in multiple times in different capacities. If stuff like that has happened, I actually make a decision to not accept them that year, to give other people an opportunity and a chance to perform and be in the festival or be on the stage. Those are just some of the pieces that are really important. It's never easy as a producer to have to curate a show because we are accountable both to our own performers and the rest of the team, but also to the audience and making sure that the audience sees themselves reflected on stage. And sometimes another thing is the logistics for the act itself just don't work. If it is an act that has a lot of mess or extravagant setup, that might just not be logistically possible to give somebody 15 minutes to set up an act beforehand. If someone has aerials but your venue doesn't allow aerials or doesn't have a point to connect to, and sometimes acts are just not appropriate, and acts are either culturally appropriative. I've had performers apply to shows with problematic music. So many reasons as a producer why somebody might say no to an act. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes there is also the personal bias, and I am a strong advocate for going to where you feel valued, of going to the shows and the festivals and applying to where you genuinely feel like people care about you or are gonna put in the effort. And moving more onto the personal side of things, it is always hard. I know some people who can take rejection easy and they can just move on to the next one. I personally am somebody who can do both kind of relatively okay, not put too much of my own connection into an application if I'm told no, but at the same time, if it builds up, if it's been a full year of applications hearing no, I can feel pretty bummed about that. And so some of the things that I really recommend when I apply to festivals, one, it's really important to have education and knowledge and being informed. So for me, having that bigger understanding, especially since I've started producing Shade and Isle of Teas, having that bigger background and understanding of why a producer might say no to acts. I know there's often for festivals that have 30 spots, maybe 40 to perform. Shows have probably 12, and some producers get 2, 3, 4 times as many applications as spots they have. Festivals get hundreds of applications. It's very, very competitive. Breaking in for the first time can definitely be challenging. And for me, again, like having that previous knowledge really helps me of having those expectations when I go in to apply that there's a pretty good chance I won't get in, but it would be really cool if I did. That can help me stay grounded in whatever the outcome is. Another thing that I like to do is when I apply to festivals, when I see that email in my inbox or shows, I try to make sure I'm in a good headspace to open that email. If I have had a really, really bad day at work, maybe I'm just exhausted and my emotional capacity is not quite the same as on a good day, I might not open it that day and I might let it sit for a day or two. Within reason, a lot of producers require a response by a specific date to confirm your acceptance, but at least I give myself a day to be able to mentally prepare myself to make sure I'm in a good headspace to open it. And sometimes that even means I'll have a tea with me. I'll make sure I have some food and I'm nourished to make sure like physically I'm in a good state to read it, or mentally. That can really help you with being ready for that. And often when you get those notifications from producers, whether it's for a show or a festival, it's not a never. It is not this time. That can still be really hard. Some people might think, but I want it this time. If it's a producer you really want to work with one day, or you really want to go to that festival one day, keep applying, because you never know when it is going to be a yes. And there's been times when I've had to say no to a performer one specific year, and I've mentally been like, God, I hope they apply next year, because I'm gonna be disappointed if I'm planning to say yes the year after and they don't apply. That's not necessarily their fault. It's up to everybody to decide what their capacity is for applications, which shows they can afford to travel to that year. So sometimes even performers will pick and choose which festivals or shows they'll apply to one year versus the next. Definitely please keep applying and know it's not never, it is just not this time. And you also don't have to do it alone. I know some people who will have somebody open a notification with them so they can be together during it. I have personally talked to friends or my partner at times when I'm like, I got rejected from an opportunity I was really looking forward to, and it feels crappy. You're not alone in burlesque, and having a support network around you, especially one that you actually use and reach out to and lean into, can be so important. And sometimes it's great to just spend time with people, even if you're not talking about the specific thing itself. If you just were like, I just need to be with people, I need to watch TV beside somebody, I need to go for coffee with somebody, whatever you need, that can be super helpful to just get you with people. And depending on what kind of person you are as well, if you're someone who is quite proactive, who's open to feedback, there's no harm in reaching out to the producers to ask if they might have feedback on your application, or if they might have feedback on the performance or the video. They might not specifically tell you why you were not accepted this time for their show, but at least they might be willing and open to giving advice for future, or helping you expand and continue to build your skills. Sometimes it's just the video quality. If it's an old video 3 years ago, but you've really updated it now and you know it's really good, but the producer can't know that without seeing that new video, that might be the secret. And this isn't so much on the performer receiving that notification email, but just on everybody. I think it's also super important that we have these conversations and talk about the reality that not everyone gets accepted into every festival or every show. There are a lot of people who get told no, and those people who get told multiple times. That is part of the industry aspect of burlesque and drag and shows. There are only so many opportunities, and we do definitely see cliques, and we do definitely see bias. We do see producers often who do really need to examine their own practices and who do need to examine how they cast performers. But also, again, that is equally part of the reality of when we want to apply to shows. And no matter what, for many people, it is never easy, regardless of if they have somebody to support them, if they have grounded themselves, if they've taken a bath. Rejection and being told you have not been accepted in a show or festival, it's hard, and know that you're not alone. I've been told many times, I still get told no when I apply to festivals or shows. And even if this video didn't give you specific advice of, you're guaranteed to be okay with rejection now, I hope it at least offered some insight and some care, because I know it can be hard to navigate, especially if you're doing it on your own. You're not alone. And if you're somebody who has found your own kind of formula or what you like to do for self-care or navigating rejection for shows and festivals, I would love to see what people say down below in the comments with any advice or insights you might have. And I think it's important that we continue to have this conversation so that new people who keep coming into burlesque or who keep going into festivals for the first time or shows for the first time, it's important to see what different people do and take into account to make sure they're being taken care of and they can keep going as performers. Please leave any thoughts you have down below. I look forward to seeing them, and I also look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!